Teen. JATAKA. Cursed be the dart of love. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery about the temptation caused to brethren by the wives of their mundane life. This will be told in the Indriya Jataka in the 8th book. Said the Lord Buddha to the brother, "Brother, it was because of this very woman that in past days you met your death and were roasted over glowing embers." The brethren asked the Lord Buddha to explain this. The Lord Buddha made clear what had been concealed from them by rebirth. From now on we shall omit the words respecting the brethren's request for an explanation and the making clear what had been concealed by rebirth. And we shall only say told this story of the past. When only this is said, all the rest is to be supplied and repeated as above, the request, the simile of setting free the moon from the clouds, and the making clear what had been concealed by rebirth. Once upon a time in the kingdom of Magadha the king was reigning in Rajraha city, and when the crops were grown the deer were exposed to great perils, so that they retired to the forest. Now a certain mountain stag of the forest, having become attached to a doe who came from near a village, was moved by his love for her to accompany her when the deer returned home from the forest. Said she, "You, sir, are but a simple stag of the forest, and the neighborhood of villages is troubled with peril and danger. So don't come down with us." But he because of his great love for her would not stay, but came with her. When they knew that it was the time for the deer to come down from the hills, the Magadha folk placed themselves in ambush by the road. And a hunter was lying in wait just by the road along which the pair were travelling. Scenting a man, the young doe suspected that a hunter was in ambush, and let the stag go on first, following herself at some distance. With a single arrow the hunter laid the stag low, and the doe seeing him struck was off like the wind. Then that hunter came on from his hiding place and skinned the stag and lighting a fire cooked the sweet flesh over the embers. Having eaten and drunk, he took off home the remainder of the bleeding carcass on his carrying pole to feed his children. Now in those clays the Bodhisattva was a fairy living in that very grove of trees, and he noticed what had come to pass. It was not father or mother, but passion alone that destroyed this foolish deer. The dawn of passion is bliss, but its end is sorrow and suffering, the painful loss of hands, and the misery of the 5 forms of bonds and blows. To cause another's death is accounted condemnation in this world. Condemned too is the land which owns a woman's sway and rule. And condemned are the men who yield themselves to women's dominion. And with that, while the other fairies of the wood applauded and offered perfumes and flowers and the like in an act of homage, the Bodhisattva wove the 3 condemnations into a single stanza, and made the wood re-echo with his sweet tones as he taught the truth in these lines. Cursed be the dart of love that works men pain. Cursed be the land where women rule supreme. And cursed the fool that bows to woman's sway. Thus in a single stanza were the 3 condemnations comprised by the Bodhisattva, and the woods re-echoed as he taught the truth with all the mastery and grace of a Buddha. His lesson ended, the master preached the 4 truths, at the close of which the lovesick brother was established in the fruit of the first path. Having told the 2 stories, the master explained the relation linking the 2 together, and identified the birth. Henceforth, we shall omit the words having told the 2 stories, and simply say explained the relation. The words omitted are to be supplied as before. In those days, said the master, the lovesick brother was the mountain stag. His mundane wife was the young doe, and I was myself the fairy who preached the truth showing the sin of passion. Jataka number 14. Vadamiga Jataka. There's nothing worse. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery, about the elder monk Tissa, called direct alms the less. Tradition says that, while the master was living at the bamboo grove near Rajraha city, the scion of a wealthy house, Prince Tissa by name, coming one day to the bamboo grove and there hearing a discourse from the master, wished to join the brotherhood. But, being refused because his parents would not give their consent, obtained their consent by following Rathapala's example and refusing food for 7 days, and finally took the vows with the master. About a fortnight after admitting this young man, the master went from the bamboo grove to Jetavana monastery. where the young nobleman undertook the 13 obligations and passed his time in going his round for alms from house to house, omitting none. Under the name of the elder monk Tissa direct alms the less, he became as bright and shining a light in Buddhism as the moon in the vault of heaven. A festival having been proclaimed at this time at Rajraha city. The elder monk's mother and father laid in a silver casket the trinkets he used to wear as a layman, and took it to heart, bewailing thus, "At other festivals our son used to wear this or that bravery as he kept the festival. And he, our only son, has been taken away by the sage Gautam to the town of Shravasthi city. Where is our son sitting now or standing?" Now a slave girl who came to the house, noticed the lady of the house weeping, and asked her why she was weeping. And the lady told her all. "What, madam, was your son fond of?" "Of such and such a thing," replied the lady. "Well, if you will give me authority in this house, I'll fetch your son back." "Very good," said the lady in consent, and gave the girl her expenses and sent her with a large following, saying, "Go, and manage to fetch my son back." So away the girl rode in a palanquin, covered manual carriage for carrying one person, to Shravasthi city, where she took up her residence in the street which the elder monk used to frequent for alms, surrounding herself with servants of her own, and never allowing the elder monk to see his father's people about. She watched the moment when the elder monk entered the street and at once gave him an alms of food and drink. And when she had bound him in the bonds of the craving of taste, she got him eventually to seat himself in the house, till she knew that her gifts of food as alms had put him in her power. Then she feigned sickness and lay down in an inner chamber. In the due course of his round for alms at the proper time, the elder monk came to the door of her house. And her people took the elder monk's bowl and made him sit down in the house. When he had seated himself, he said, "Where is the lay disciple?" "She's ill, sir. She would be glad to see you." Bound as he was by the bonds of the craving of taste, he broke his vow and obligation, and went to where the woman was lying. Then she told him the reason of her coming, and so brought on him that, all because of his being bound by the bonds of the craving of taste, she made him give up the brotherhood. When he was in her power, she put him in the palanquin and came back with a large following to Rajraha city again. All this was noised abroad. Sitting in the hall of truth, the brethren discussed the matter, saying, "Sirs, it is reported that a slave girl has bound in the bonds of the craving of taste, and has carried off the elder monk Tissa the less, called direct alms." Entering the hall, the master sat down on his jeweled seat, and said, "What, brethren, is the subject of discussion in this gathering?" They told him the incident. "Brethren," said he, "this is not the first time that, in bondage to the craving of taste, he has fallen into her power. In past days too he fell into her power in like manner." And so saying, he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, he had a gardener named Sanjaya. Now there came into the king's garden a winged antelope, which fled away at the sight of Sanjaya, but the latter let it go without terrifying the timid creature. After several visits the antelope used to roam about in the garden. Now the gardener was in the habit of gathering flowers and fruits and taking them day by day to the king. Said the king to him one day, "Have you noticed anything strange, friend gardener, in the garden?" "Only, sir, that a winged antelope has come about the grounds." "Could you catch it, do you think?" "Oh, yes. If I had a little honey, I'd bring it right into your majesty's palace." The king ordered the honey to be given to the man, and he went off with it to the garden, where he first anointed with the honey the grass at the spots frequented by the antelope, and then hid himself. When the antelope came and tasted the honeyed grass, it was so snared by the lust of taste that it would go nowhere else but only to the garden. Noticing the success of his snare, the gardener began gradually to show himself. The appearance of the man made the antelope take to flight for the first day or two. But growing familiar with the sight of him, it gathered confidence and gradually came to eat grass from the man's hand. He, noting that the creature's confidence had been won, first laid the path as thick as a carpet with broken branches. Then tying a gourd full of honey on his shoulder and sticking a bunch of grass in his waistcloth, he kept dropping wisps of the honeyed grass in front of the antelope till at last he got it right inside the palace. No sooner was the antelope inside than they shut the door. At sight of men the antelope, in fear and trembling for its life, rushed to and fro about the hall. And the king coming down from his chamber above, and seeing the trembling creature, said, "So timid is the winged antelope that for a whole week it will not revisit a spot where it has so much as seen a man. And if it has once been frightened anywhere, it never goes back there again all its life long. Yet, snared by the lust of taste, this wild thing from the jungle has actually come to a place like this. Truly, my friends, there is nothing viler in the world than this lust of taste." And he put his teaching into this stanza. There's nothing worse, men say, than taste to snare. At bourne or with one's friends. Lo! Taste it was that unto Sanjaya delivered up the jungle-haunting antelope so wild. And with these words he let the antelope go back to its forest again. When the master had ended his lesson, and had repeated what he had said as to that brother having fallen into that woman's power in past days as well as in the present time, he explained the relation and identified the birth, by saying, in those days this slave girl was Sanjaya, direct alms the less was the winged antelope, and I myself was the king of Benares. JATAKA number 15. Khuddhaka JATAKA. 4 Win a deer. This story was told by the master while at JATAKA monastery about an unruly brother. Tradition says that this brother was unruly and would not mind admonition. Accordingly, the master asked him, saying, "Is it true, as they say, that you are unruly and will not mind admonition?" "It is true, Lord Buddha," was the reply. "So too in past days," said the master, "you were unruly and would not mind the admonition of the wise and good, with the result that you were caught in a snare and met your death." And so saying, he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was in Benares, the Bodhisattva was born a deer and lived in the forest at the head of a herd of deer. His sister brought her son to him, saying, "Brother, this is your nephew. Teach him deer's tactics." And thus she placed her son under the Bodhisattva's care. Said the latter to his nephew, "Come at such and such a time and I will give you a lesson." But the nephew made no appearance at the time appointed. And, as on that day, so on 7 days did he skip his lesson and fail to learn the tricks of deer. And at last, as he was roaming about, he was caught in a snare. His mother came and said to the Bodhisattva, "Brother, was not your nephew taught deer's tactics?" "Take no thought for the unteachable rascal," said the Bodhisattva. "Your son failed to learn the tactics of deer." And so saying, having lost all desire to advise the rascal even in his deadly peril, he repeated this stanza. For when a deer has twice 4 hoofs to run, and branching antlers armed with countless sharp points, and when by 7 tricks he's saved himself, I teach him then, Khuddhaka, no more." But the hunter killed the self-willed deer that was caught in the snare, and departed with its flesh. When the master had ended this lesson in support of what he had said as to the unruliness of the brother in past days as well as in the present, he explained the relation, and identified the birth, by saying in those days this unruly brother was the nephew deer, Upalavana was the sister, and I myself the deer who gave the advice.